Yes, that's right. It's Joe here live for Joyrider TV, back with some more Q&A, answering your catamaran sailing questions. So we've got an exciting session planned for you today. That's the royal we, of course. It's just me. The main topic of discussion today is going to be how to improve your upwind performance. So before we come on to that, the main topic, I did take a glance at the live chat and I saw that Scott is in there dropping it in the slot. Good to have you on board, Scott. And Scott's got some very good questions, which are pretty quick to answer. So I thought we'd just go into that straight away. So Scott says, please tell us where, he says, in water speed, can we find the global speed stick community to post our times there or our speeds? There isn't currently a speed stick community on the water speed app. At this time, I would say that the water speed app is one of the best ones to use for tracking your speed, but there isn't a specific speed stick element to it at this time. I am developing a Joyrider speed stick app of itself where you record your session and that automatically will upload to the global speed stick leaderboard, but it's not ready. But this is actually a topic which is trending for me at the moment because I've been all day editing the new speed stick update video, which will be out on Sunday. That's tomorrow, actually. Yes, because it's not Friday yet. It will be out on Sunday, and there are some exciting moments in there, I can tell you. I have set up a new group for uploading, for not uploading, but for logging your speeds on Facebook. It's called Global Speed Stick Challenge. So just head over to Facebook, join the group, and then you just post your results on there. And if you can also post a picture or a video clip on there as well, then that means we can, the royal we again, I can use that in the next update video, which makes the update video that little bit more interesting to watch, I think. Okay, so that is question number one. The second one, how do you post footage to the Joyrider Worldwide YouTube channel? All right, so the way to do this is to head over to totaljoyrider.com, my website, and there you will see in the menu bar at the top one that says Joyrider Worldwide. Just click on there and there's a little bit to fill in with like your email address and your name, and you click on that, and then basically from doing that you'll be granted access to upload to the Joyrider Worldwide YouTube channel. But just one thing to note is the email address that you put on there needs to be the one that you use to log in to YouTube. So if you always watch YouTube not logged in, then you wouldn't be able to upload to the Joyrider Worldwide channel, because it has to be a YouTube linked email address. So like a Gmail address. If you don't have one, you could just set one up especially to do that, and then you could actually subscribe to Joyrider TV after all these years. Very nice. So there we go. That is that. So there we go. So the question has come in from Marcus and Esther, who sail an FX1 double-handed from Jericho Beach, Vancouver, British Columbia. And they said that they took part in one of their most significant regattas recently, and they raced against all sorts of boats, Formula 18s, Hobie 18s, Hobie 16s, Hobie 17s. But what they discovered was that their upwind performance compared to the other boats, quote, sucked big time. In fact, I would estimate that I had to bear away from the typical fleet course to the upwind mark by possibly as much as 20 degrees. Now, that can't be right. So they had a look at the FX1 tuning guide, and one element that they mentioned, which is going to be a factor for why is our upwind performance not particularly good, I would say probably more so the downwind would be affected. But the FX1 was originally designed as a single-handed boat, so racing the FX1 with two adults on board, you are going to feel yourself a little bit penalized there because of the way the boat was initially designed. But having said that, the volume distribution in the FX1 specifically is very good, very efficient. It floats very well. It is a relatively high volume hull shape, which means it should be able to carry the weight without certainly without having to bear away 20 degrees from other boats sailing upwind. What would that look like? So there is a normal boat sailing upwind and you're having to sail like this. Yeah. And I would wager that when you're sailing like that, you're not going so much faster that when you tack, you're still with them. I would guess that you're losing out in that way as well. So what we're going to do in answering this question is we're going to start off with boat setup. And I know probably most of you don't sail an FX1 specifically, but everything I'm going to talk about is going to be relevant to all, let's call them performance tight rigged catamarans. So the boats that this isn't, there will be elements of this which are applicable, but not all of it, especially not the rig setup, not applicable to like the Hobie 16, the Dart 18, and boats like that, which basically don't have diamond wires. All right, so that's what we're into. I hope everyone's on board with this because that's the way that we're going. All right, so we've got three ways that we can alter the setup of the mast on the boat. The first one is mast bend. We can pre-bend the mast. Second one, mast rake. And the third one, rig tension. All right, so let's get into it straight away with the mast bend. What we have on the mast is on these tight rigged catamarans or performance catamarans, we've got these parts which are called spreaders, which are located about halfway from the bottom of the mast to the hounds where the rigging attaches. And these are like metal bars or some sort of solid parts that form kind of like a triangle off the mast. And basically we can adjust the angle of these. So we could have them, this would be what we'd call quite far forwards, where the ends of the diamond wires, the ends of the spreaders are level with the back of the mast. Or we could have them quite far back, where the tips of the spreaders are much further back than the back of the mast. So how can changing the spreader rake change the performance of the boat? The further back we put the spreaders, so here's the spreaders on this one, that is going to push. When we tension the wires, these are diamond wires. So when we tension those wires, it's going to push here. If we have more spreader rake, like on this one, and what that's going to do is push this part of the mast forwards, and that is going to give us what we call pre-bend. So What does prebend do? It does two things. One thing is it changes the relationship between the sail and the mast. If you think of the sail, if you have a sail, let's say, which has a totally straight luff, the front edge of the sail is totally straight, and we put that straight edge against, against a curved mast, then what that's going to do, kind of like when you're making a cone out of paper, it's going to put a load of curve into the sail. So by putting a straight edge against the curved edge, the profile of the sail is going to be very curved like this before we even talk about what we're doing with the battens. So that is one way to look at it. However, what most boats, when they're designed and built, have in mind is the sails are generally made, the sailmaker who makes the sails will cut the sails with a certain amount of curve in the luff, in the front edge, which means for each different type of boat, there will be an optimal amount of spreader rake, the angle of the spreaders, and that is going to depend on your crew weight. So you'll never, it's very unlikely that you'll come across a boat where the optimal amount of spreader rake is, let's call it flat. So what we would do is we would look at a rig tuning guide, find out what the optimal spreader rake is for our combined crew weight. And then to measure the spreader rake, we're going to need something a little bit longer than that. We'd put a batten between the diamond wires. So this is a straight batten. We'd put it between the diamond wires right next to the spreaders. And then we will measure this distance here between the batten and the trailing edge of the mast. And just from memory, for an FX1, that measurement should be, for a heavy team, about 5 centimeters. And then for a lighter team, up to about 6.5 centimeters, the distance between the batten and the trailing edge of the mast. If we go further back, if we have the mast straighter, so further forwards, it's going to give us a straighter mast, and that is going to put more curve into the sail, making the sail more powerful. If we have more spreader rake, it's going to push that part of the mast further forwards, which is going to give us a more curved mast, which is going to give us a flatter sail, which is going to be better generally for lighter teams. Now, the other effect of the prebend in the mast is it makes a huge difference to how easy it is to get the downhaul on. So if you've been watching these Q&As for a while now, you'll know all about the downhaul. But what the downhaul does is when we pull it on initially, reach for the calibration sticker, when we pull it on initially, like let's say to number 1, that stops the sail from being a flat, shapeless thing, and it puts the curve into the sail. So pulling it on to number 1 is like switching the sail on. We want to sail now. We want to get some drive from the sail. If we pull it beyond number 1, then what we're starting to do is we're starting to flatten the sail, certainly flatten the upper part of the sail, and we're moving the center of effort, the deepest part of the sail, down and forwards, which makes the boat much more efficient as the wind starts getting stronger. So when the wind is at full power, or you're starting to really want to lose power, maximum on the downhaul is going to make the boat so much easier to manage, which is why having a pre-bent mast on these types of boats is really going to help. Because if you think about on something that is totally straight, it's going to be hard to get it to bend initially. But if you've got a little bit of bend in it, like the pre-bend in the mast, when we push down on it, which is actually with the downhaul, we're pulling down, be very easy to bend. So it means you can pull the downhaul on much more easily. Okay, so spreaders set to the crew weight. So once you know who your sailing partner is generally going to be, then you find out what your spreader rake or spreader deflection wants to be. You set that, and it's one of the things that you're less likely to adjust more frequently. And then with the diamond wires, we'll actually adjust the diamond wires depending on the strength of the wind. So what we would do, and this should hopefully make sense from what I've said already, is in lighter wind, we'll have the diamond wires less tight. I'm not going to say looser, because they'll never be what you would describe as loose. They're always going to have tension in them. And compared to the actual tension of the rig, like the shrouds, they'll have significantly more tension in the diamond wires than you would have in the shrouds. So back to our, let's call it a legacy Formula 18 or FX1. The Tornado shares a lot of the same numbers as well. So what would be the number on the loose gauge? The loose gauge is the industry standard rig tension gauge for the types of boats. The diamond wires would be 34, 35, which I know is much for those of you who sail a modern Formula 18, like an Evolution or an Acura, even a C2, back that far from like to the flat bottomed, more wing mast sectioned Formula 18s, you'll be running with much higher numbers. So light winds, we'd set this at 34, 35 on the loose gauge, which is still, you feel that is pretty tight. And you would see just a small amount of curve go into the mast, of course, depending on our spreader rake. And then we have got another measurement that we could take. So, for example, if you don't happen to have a loose gauge handy, how can you get an idea of, if you take your main halyard and pull it tight from the top, okay, so we've talked about mast bend and we've talked about mast rake. So a lighter team will carry more mast rake, because what that is going to do is help to reduce the amount of power that we have in the rig. Now, what are we doing? What is the actual effect of the mast rake on the boat? Well, what we're doing is in the sail, and yes, we have talked about this before, but in the sail, we have got what is called, or in the whole rig, in fact, we've got what's called the center of effort. Now, that is the part of the rig where where the power is coming from. So the center of effort is kind of line the center of effort up with the trailing edge of the dagger board, which means we're bringing the mast back a little bit more. And what that is going to do when we make that relationship like that, so the center of effort is just slightly further back, it's really going to improve our upward pointing ability. And then this is a reason why on some boats, as it gets windier, we want to sail with more mast rake, because what are we doing when it gets windier? We're pulling on the downhaul more. What happens when we pull on the downhaul more? It moves the center of effort in the sail further forwards. So more mast rake when it's windy is going to keep that relationship as we want it. But the other reason that more mast rake is going to help us when it's windier is because as it's windier, we're going to start getting more lift from the rudder blades as well. So if it's double trapezing conditions, we're going to be getting more lift from the rudder blades, which means it's going to work better to bring the mast further back, because we're no longer just using the dagger boards for gaining lift. We're also using the rudder blades, which means if we can put the center of effort about halfway between the rudder blades and the dagger boards, then that's really going to help to get us maximum lift on the upwind. And it's really going to help us to be really firing the boat on a good course upwind. So just by doing that, we should be able to sail closer to the wind. But in a lighter wind, when we're definitely not trapezing, that is when we want to have the center of effort just level with the center of lateral resistance, or just slightly behind. Okay, so I think we're all good there on the mast rake. So the third one, and I think this could make a big difference on a boat like this, Legacy Formula 18. This might be if you've got a Prindle 18.2, Hurricane 5.9, anything like that, then we want to sail with the rig tight at all times. And we're actually doing the opposite of what we would do with a boat like a Hobie 16, because we've got sophisticated means of losing power. We don't want to loosen the rig off when it starts getting windy, because what that is going to do is, in the luff of the jib and the whole rig, it's going to put a big curve in the front, and that is really going to take away our ability to sail close to the wind. So we want to keep the rig very tight at all times, which on a Legacy Formula 18 FX1, those boats, that means that the lowest number that we want on our rig tension gauge would be about 25. We wouldn't ever want it any lower than that. So Marcus and Esther said that they had it on 9 on the loose gauge. That is really way too loose. So if you don't have a loose gauge, how can we determine how tight we need to have the rig? A good way of doing it is, if to actually physically be able to tighten the rig, if we actually use about 100 kilograms, that's 220 pounds of person. So we'd have the person. So what we would do, the actual procedure in tightening the rig on a boat like this would be, we've obviously got a shroud on both sides, and we want to make it easy for ourselves. So on the shroud, on the adjuster on one side, we want to set that where we think the right spot is, which is easy if you've set it up before and you know. So on a lot of boats, especially Hobies, for some reason that ends up being 4 from the bottom. So we'll put one of the shrouds 4 from the bottom, with the other one from when we put the mast up, we'd have that in the top hole. So we now want to get the other one in this spot 4 from the bottom. So if it takes 100 kilo or 220 pounds person pulling on the trapeze, we could of course use 2 lighter people pulling on the trapeze. And if you think about where we want to pull on the trapeze, we want to be pulling diagonally back. So the person pulling would want to be, I'd put 1 foot for sure on the hull, pulling from here, really hanging off it and pulling it as tight as possible. And then if with the 100 kilo person really giving it some beans on the trapeze wire and might even have to bounce it a little bit, if that is when that goes in, that is about 26, 27 on the loose gauge. If you have got a loose gauge, a much easier way of getting the rig tension on is to actually attach the main sheet to a trapeze wire, bring the main sheet all the way across with the traveler to the side that you're wanting to tighten. And then I would then tie the traveler to keep it locked on that side of the boat. Maybe there's just anything, put it around the hull, maybe to keep it across there, maybe tie it to a tree, anything that works. And then you can crank the main sheet in until the shroud on this side goes loose enough for you to be able to put the pin in on the other shroud. And then loosen the main sheet off again completely, check the rig tension on your loose gauge if you have one. If it is too loose, then, and you've got both shrouds on the same, we're going to need to move them both down by 1. But the difficulty with this style of adjuster is when you move it down by 1, it actually changes the reading on the loose gauge by about 8 or 9. So if it's, let's say it was 20 with it on number 4, if you move it down by 1 on both sides, it would probably go up to about 29. But even if you're a heavy team, it's better to have it on 29 than on 20, because you never want it looser than 25. Now, one thing, especially if you're sailing an older boat, that can influence your shroud settings, and when I say this, it's going to sound really obvious, is actually on the front beam where you've got most boats would have a ball on the front beam where the mast sits, and over time that ball is going to wear. What's going to happen as it wears? The mast's going to start sitting slightly lower down, which means with the shrouds in the same position, then the rig is going to be looser. So do keep an eye on the condition of your ball, and if it's starting to look worn, then they're not particularly expensive to replace, so well worth replacing. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll just go on to the next part of the setup, and then I'll jump into the live chat and see what we're talking about in there, because we have been going for a little while on this topic. All right, so we've set up the rig, the prebend, we've set our mast rake, we have set our rig tension. What's next is battens. So the first thing is the actual batten selection. Now, why do battens make a difference? There's 2 different ways that battens can be different. One way is actually the stiffness of the batten. So a way of determining how stiff your battens are, especially if you really want to really know, is if you take your batten like this, put it on a set of bathroom scales or possibly kitchen scales with, you know, electronic kitchen scales, and push down on the batten from the top and see how many kilos of pressure it takes before it bends. And that is how you rate the stiffness of your battens. Ideally, all of your battens should be of the same construction, which would mean they would be pretty much the same stiffness. Now, this is a bit more, let's call it advanced, for trying to be able to point as close to the wind as the other boats. I think with the changes we've made with the rig setup, that should do it already. But having a uniform set of battens in the mainsail is really going to help. So there's stiffness, and then there's also tapering in the battens. Like some battens have got no taper at all, so it's just the same thickness all the way along the batten, whereas for a more performance batten, the batten would be thinner at the front, which means that front part of the batten is going to bend more easily, which means the center of effort in the mainsail is going to be like with a uniform batten, like standard Hobie 16 batten. That is a good example. The bend in the sail, the curve in the sail is going to be as standard like this. Whereas with a tapered batten, one which gets thinner as you come more to the front, the bend in the batten, if this is the mast at this end, is going to be more like this, where the center of effort is going to be further forwards, and that is going to make the boat much faster. Okay, so those are the two ways that the battens can differ. But what could we actually do with the actual battens that we're using to make a difference? Well, the only difference that we generally do, most normal people who aren't sailing either to win the World Championships or to do the Olympic Games, would be between heavy winds and light winds. We might just change the top 2 or 3 battens depending on wind strength. So what do we want to do there? If the wind is lighter, we want to put softer battens in. That is battens that bend more easily, so that we're getting more curve in the top of the sail. If the wind is stronger, we want to put stiffer battens in to the top of the sail, because we don't want the curve in the top of the sail when the wind is strong. We want the top of the sail pretty flat when the wind is strong. That's going to make the boat much more efficient, especially on that upwind course that we're talking about. So swapping the top 2 or 3 battens for wind strength, if you've got that facility, can really be helpful. All right, so the final one with battens before we get into the live chat is, how much tension do we want? Okay, so if we have the sail resting flat on the floor and we're putting the battens in, what we want to aim to do, let's say actually this is the floor, this is the batten. We want to tighten the batten enough so that the ends of the sail lift off the floor in a light wind. What would it be? Just not quite as much as, yeah, I think an inch is fair for the end of the sail to lift off the floor by 1 inch at the end, at both ends. That's how much batten tension we want to put in to the batten in a lighter wind. In a stronger wind, I would still leave them the same, because what we risk if we loosen the battens off because we don't want the curve is we no longer have the control of the shape of the sail. So we're always going to want to have that amount of batten tension, which really does seem to be the sweet spot these days. Okay, so we're going to park that there. I hope that that is extremely helpful in how we can get better performance out of our legacy Formula 18, Tornado, Hurricane 5.9, Prindle 19, 18.2. What would it be, like a Nacra 5.2 maybe? Or boats of a similar ilk, like that. Yeah, okay. So into the live chat. By the way, we have been going for 46 minutes now. If you are finding any of this information useful, you can just let me know that it's been useful by investing in a super chat or super sticker, which is a great way of supporting Joyrider TV, and it keeps the Q&A ad free. Thank you very much. All right, so we have got, if you're still here, that is because it was quite a while ago. We have got Glauco here from Queensland. Oh, in Australia. Crikey, it must be the middle of the night. Yeah, we'll be lucky if you're still there. But yeah, glad to have you on board. Working on my Hobie Cat Miracle 20. What do you suggest to restore a mast? The aluminium part has wear marks from the old steel wires, and the fiberglass part too. Thanks. Yeah. So if you're wanting to get your mast looking brand new, there are different levels that we could go to. Like one level that you could go to is just try cleaning it with some people use WD-40 just to really clean it up, but I'm not a big fan of the WD-40 because if you don't wipe it all off the mast when you finish cleaning it, it can of course get on your sail, which isn't very nice. So in the past, I have been using a special mix which I call salad dressing because it's made from vinegar and lemons. I know, sounds delicious. Yeah, so I just chop up loads of lemons. We get a lot of lemons grown on trees here. Chop up a load of lemons, put them in a big container of vinegar, leave it for, I don't know, 2 weeks to start to do the magic. And then that seems to clean up a mast really nicely, but it won't restore it to looking like it's new. To get it looking like it's new, and what John Forbes, who is responsible for the Hobie 18 reimagined fleet and for restoring old boats so they look kind of better than new, is to actually get the mast re-anodized. Now, I have no idea how much that costs or where you would take it to get it done. But when you get it done, the mast looks absolutely brand new afterwards. So if you've got the means, and perhaps there's a marina near to where you are, or some sort of place where yachts are looked after, that might be a place where re-anodizing masts could take place. If anybody knows where you would get a mast re-anodized, do put it in the live chat or in the comments, because that is quite interesting. The fiberglass part of the mast, so it's obviously a comp tip. I think what I would do is just, if there is some of the old coating on the fiberglass or comp tip part of the mast, I would get rid of anything that's flaking, and then it'll be the same as what I did with my tornado mast when I recoated it the first 2 times, which was to get a 2-part kind of like marine varnish epoxy coating, clear coat, and basically paint that on. And after putting that on, it looked absolutely brand new. So that is what I would suggest there. Thank you very much. All right, we've got Paulie Paul on board, who says my next Formula 18 will be a Nacra. Good choice. The good old C2 tuning guide can be best described as lacking. Yet the Nacra tuning guides are very good, and everything in the Nacra tuning guides for the new boats especially, they've really put in a lot of time, effort, research, and put it together so everything in there is exactly what you need to know. So, like when I went to the Nacra Evolution event last year at Lake Como, I started off by asking everybody, what should my mast rake be? How much rig tension do I need? And the information that everybody was giving me was very much exactly the same as the tuning guide, which really is the evidence that the tuning guide is correct. But they put a lot of work into their tuning guide to make sure that everything that you need to know is in there. So even if you don't sail a Nacra, like for example, if you did sail at C2, for example, having a look at the Evolution tuning guide is going to give you a pretty good idea of what you want to be doing. All right. So we've got Senju 104 on board. Why you use cask? Where I am, we don't. I don't understand that. Oh, sorry. I don't know what cask is. You might have to. Okay. Oh, yeah. My English is not perfect. Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah. So no subtitles in the live chat until after 2 days. Then subtitles in different languages become available once Google or YouTube has had the chance to listen to what I've been saying and put them in there. So apologies for that. Cask for the head. What could that be? Helmet. Ah, okay. Yes. Thank you. Yes, that is a fit. Yes. Okay. Why do you use a helmet? All right. This is a good question. The first reason why I started using a helmet was so that I could put the camera on it, just for mounting the GoPro on the helmet. Very handy there. But once I owned a helmet, it started making me think that I should wear a helmet whenever I think that there is a good chance. So it is very likely that I might capsize. Because over the years I've most of my career in sailing has been in teaching sailing and taking people out sailing in high winds. And over the years, there have been some people who have hit their head on the mast. And I did at one point have concussion, which was absolutely horrible. It was a nasty experience. and I never want to have that again. So since that happened, I decided I'm not going to leave my helmet in the car, in the trailer, in the changing room. I'm going to put it on when I go out sailing when it's windy, because you don't have to be sailing a fast foiling boat to hit your head really hard on the mast is the worst place. And I can actually show you the normal way that bad things happen. Sorry to drop things down a little bit, but I think it's good to know. Right, so if you're out on the trapeze and the boat suddenly stops, now one of the most common things to happen, especially with people who aren't quite as confident sailing in high winds, is you get a gust of wind. What do? You push the rudders as hard as you can, which sends the boat upwind, and at the same time the boat slows down really suddenly. So what does the guy on the trapeze do? He starts flying forwards, but the boat doesn't capsize, which means he goes forwards until he's upside down, going head first backwards into the mast. That is the most likely way, I think, in my experience, that you could hit your head while you're sailing. And that is why I think it's a really good idea to wear a helmet if the wind is very strong or very gusty. And very strong is a relative term, relative to your experience sailing the boat which you're going sailing on. There we go. It's a good question. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got Og Dosev on board. Amazing hints as always. Thank you very much. What about other setups which have similar side tensioners but final tension from the jib? Yeah, so like on a Hobie 16, then from what I was just saying with the rig tension, we're actually doing the opposite on a Hobie 16, because what we want to happen on a Hobie 16, which is, I think it's one of the few boats which I can think of which actually use the jib halyard tension for the mast, rake and rig tension, is on those boats. What we want to happen is, as the wind gets stronger, what you will feel on the upwind, if you've got your rig really tight, it will feel like the boat, when you get a gust, it wants to lift the hull, but it doesn't want to go any faster. And that's because we're trying to carry too much power in the rig, and the rake of the mast is too upright. So like for our light wind setting on a 16 or 14, rig tension really cranked on, then that light wind setting isn't going to work particularly well when it's double trapezing conditions. So when it does become double trapezing conditions, we want to loosen the jib halyard by between 1 and 3 inches, and that brings the mast further back, which, like we were saying, more downhaul on, the center of effort goes forwards. So we bring the mast further back so that we're loading up the center of effort in the hull, and we're putting more load onto the rudder as we're going faster to get more lift from the rudder. But what that is also doing is, if we look from the back, so with the rig tension pulled on tight, if we look at the mast from behind, it would be completely straight up. But when we loosen the rig tension off, the mast is going to lean to leeward, which means the whole sail is going to open up more at the back edge, kind of like the wing of a bird, which makes it far more efficient as the wind gets stronger. So that is the difference with rig tension when we're talking about a loose rigged boat, as I like to call it, where the Hobie 16 is definitely the prime example. But in the how much rig tension would you put on in a light wind for maximum power? You put on as much as you can, but so that the mast can still freely rotate. There we go. Okay. All right. So Senju says, I understand now. This is the helmet question, but my teacher taught us in a way to fall that I didn't understand. There we are. All right, we've got Warehouse B473 on board. Hello, nice to have you in the live chat. I've seen videos of people on the trapeze get yeeted to the moon. Yes, word of the day is yeeted. Yeah, someone else used that word and it tickled me. To yeet, it means to get flung. It's a good word. I would use that word this weekend. Okay, so I think we're going to park it there. Thanks very much for coming along for this Q&A. Hopefully when the internet went a bit, if it wasn't so bad that we lost anything. Yeah, so if you're getting out sailing, take a GPS, get on the speed stick. If it's windy, consider wearing a helmet. And other than that, there is the new speed stick update video coming tomorrow. So make sure you check that one out. And other than that, thanks very much. And I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV. Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. It's too much. Thank you.